Hey guys, Kyle here from Defusion, Science of Safety. Just taking 5 minutes out of what's a very, very hot day to come and talk to you guys a little bit about how the diffusion system's actually been developed to enhance your martial arts training and self-defense skills. Okay, now there's a lot of self-defense programs out there, there's a lot of styles, and there's a lot of sort of bashing between traditional, non-traditional as to what's better for self-defense and blah 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 blah. Alright, I don't want to get into that. That's not what this is about. Okay, I'm not trying to be better than anybody else. All I'm looking to do is help people actually enhance their own skills. So one of the things we look at is changing the context of the way we train slightly. Alright, now from my experience, that's kind of one of the biggest pitfalls, if you like, of a lot of martial training, whether it be traditional martial arts or more self-defense based, that maybe do train in a bit more context, but they tend to not necessarily work within the legal framework. What we need to do is actually adapt the way we train to fit a more realistic scenario. Now, if we think about it, right, if we train traditionally, we always work to a certain format. Okay, we have the bow at the beginning, we have that dojo etiquette, so there's a lot of respect. We've got the safety equipment, there might be mats, you might wear gloves if you're going to spar, gum shields, that sort of thing. And there's a distance as well. Fights in class or in competition tend to start from distance, whereas outside doesn't really happen. There is no distance, it gets closed down and it starts usually from here. And when we look at actually how victim selection works and the difference between social and asocial violence and the mechanics of violence, that's one of the things we pick up on, is the way violence is initiated. And a lot of the time that in itself is a big thing that can throw off a lot of people that are well trained physically, because the conditions have changed. Now if you think about it, when we train a specific way, we develop our own in-brain program, our own in-brain sort of response, if you like. Okay, we predict a pattern, we recognise a pattern, we predict it and respond based on the built-in pattern or built-in response that we've created. If you change the environment, all of a sudden our prediction isn't the same. So the brain can't necessarily upload the program or the software because the environment's not the same. It hasn't got that prediction. So if the distance changes, if it starts from closer than you're used to, something as simple as elevation in aggression levels, someone being loud, all of these things can have a massive impact on the way that you respond. Okay, because if you're not used to it, the brain doesn't know how to deal with it. And that's one of the big things we look at. We look at things from a neurological perspective. We look at what actually happens within the brain, because that's one of the key fundamental points. Okay, when you change that environment, you no longer have a prediction and response pattern. Okay, that becomes threat. Threat response gets triggered. Okay, the brain starts to shut down and revert back to a more instinctive state. Okay, now if you think about it, instinctively we kind of know what we need to do already. If we didn't, we would never have survived as a race for as long as we have. We know how to fight to a degree, to fight someone off. What we tend to do is, because of the way we live our lives, generally where we are, we're not sort of dealing with violence day in, day out. In fact, for most people, violence is virtually non-existent. So when confronted with it, we're not used to it. Okay, it can cause an overload, into a sense that the threat reaction's triggered, but because we're not used to it, we've got no prediction or response based on any predictions. So we have no map, or the map we do have doesn't fit, because like we said earlier, the change in the environment, it doesn't match our prediction. So what we look to do is we look to actually try and change our map slightly, so that we can actually create a more effective map and use that prediction response that we've actually got, okay, by making it fit the environment a little bit more. I've always kind of been an advocate of techniques work, alright, providing the conditions are right and the person's in the right state to apply the technique. Change any of those 1-2 things, the technique's not going to work. So if the conditions are not right and the person's not compliant and they're really fighting you, or they've closed, the environment's changed, you're going to have a problem. If you're not in a state of mind where you can actually think logically and apply the technique, it's not going to happen. So what we try to do is kind of strip the system back to a bare bones, more sort of instinctive way of actually breaking away and dealing with violence. Even the way we strike is designed to be very natural. It's something that we would do pretty much without thinking. Alright? But we need to train it in a certain way that we allow the body to do what it knows what to do, but we train in a way that we can create a better prediction so that when we have a response ready. Alright, it works on the principle of anchoring and triggering, in the sense that the response gets anchored to a specific trigger. Alright, so we need to make that trigger as realistic as we can in a safe environment. Obviously we are going to be training indoors. It is going to be in a safe environment. There is going to be a degree of control, but there are certain things we can tweak to make it more realistic, so then the map just a little bit closer, so we've got a better prediction and response. Okay, because here's the thing, guys, right? You can't simulate reality. If you even think about it, the sentence doesn't make sense. Alright, you can't simulate reality. All you can do is work as close to reality as possible, so that when it comes to skills transfer, when your map fires, okay, your prediction is as close to reality as it can possibly be. Alright, so that's one of the key things we do. It's one of the upper hand principles. It's reality focused and non-compliant training. Alright, so it's not about, if you're an existing martial artist, telling you that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, because there are a lot of reasons for doing what you do. Okay, if you think enhanced stamina, physical strength, learning how the body works, learning how to strike, learning the movement, that's all great stuff. If we want it to work for us in self-defense, in a real world scenario against real violence, if we're looking at social or asocial violence, we need to adapt the way we train it slightly. Maybe even simplify it just a bit, so that we know in ourselves we can apply it under pressure in a real world scenario. So it may mean that, you look at Bruce Lee, his philosophy was, take what's useful and ditch what's not. If you're training specifically for self-defense, there are going to be some things that that are probably not going to be overly useful to you. So if you're training, when you're specifically training for self-defense, you ditch what's not useful. If you want to maintain that traditional element, like myself, I love doing my Okinawan weapons and my traditional elements of what I do, but I don't train that for self-defense. I train that because it helps me focus. It's almost a form of meditation for me. So it's something that I do for a different reason. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons to keep the traditional element there, but if you're going to train for self-defense, you need to make sure that you're working in such a way that you're working to as realistic environment as possible. Okay, and the scenarios you're working from are realistic as well. You have to accept the fact that if you're training in a traditional way, it's not necessarily going to fit a modern scenario. Alright, and when you think about it, a lot of the systems that we work from, obviously there's a lot of newer stuff, but a lot of the traditional arts, the way people did things was very different. Okay, they were training a lot more than most of us do for a start. The context of violence would be very different. If you think the cultural differences as well, if you look at the Japanese culture through history, it's very different to our culture. Alright, so there's a lot of things there we have to take into consideration. Alright, what would have worked then over there will not necessarily work as well here now. Okay, it's just a simple fact, because the environment will change. Anyway, I rambled on a little bit, but I hope that kind of makes sense. The idea is that we use that reality focused principle, and we look at the neurology and physiology changes under threat as well. And the idea is to actually enhance what you've got and make it more applicable to a real world scenario. Okay? Right, well, I'll be back again soon with another video. I hope you found that useful. Feel free to drop me a comment if you've got any questions. Pop onto the website. You can always send me an email. Also, just drop a comment below. And yeah, I'll be back soon. Take care, guys. Stay safe. Catch you next time. Bye.